Hi friends, welcome to TYA, a part tea party, part talk show where I get the pleasure of sitting down with today's latest and greatest TYA or Theater for Young Audiences professionals to talk about their past, present, and vision for the future of this industry. My name is Kira and I'm going to be your host for this series, though of course I can't talk to myself for the next 30 minutes, or I guess I could, but that doesn't seem like the vibe that we're going for this TYA talk show. So I've invited a very lovely and very special guest for this very special inaugural episode. He is the artistic director of the Children's Theater Company in Minneapolis, which is the largest and most acclaimed theater for young adults in the nation, which is amazing. So everyone, please welcome Peter Brosius.
Hi, everybody. Great to see you.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. It's a thrill.
So, since this is technically a tea party, it seems only fair that we start off by asking the very important question, what is your favorite kind of tea?
Oh, that's a good question. There's that, the latest one is probably that Good Earth, that, what's it called? Sugar and spicy tea, non-caffeinated, because I cut out caffeine a while ago, but it's really, really tasty and kind of smoky. And it's really good. So I like that. Or that Tazo orange one. That also has a nice bite to it. So yeah, I'm a tea drinker too. I didn't know this was a tea party. Otherwise I would have had tea. So
yes, it's the pun that we're playing off of. Tea.
It's a good one though. It's a good one. It's a good one.
Thank you. Yeah, everyone in my apartment and I too, we used to be big coffee drinkers. We would go through like a whole liter of cold brew a day.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which just caused pure chaos. So here I am with my tea, trying to be more calm nowadays, which is what I think we need.
I think that's good advice for the planet.
Yeah,
good advice for the planet.
Just drink tea. Everything will be solved.
Maybe.
Maybe. You never know.
We could hope. We could hope.
Okay, cool. Well, that's the entire interview. That's the only question I had for you.
Good night. Thanks, America.
No. But in all seriousness, I would love to start off by hearing your why when it comes to TYA. Like, what has been your journey that has brought you where you are to this amazing TYA company?
Well, I was always a theater kid, a theater nerd. You know, I grew up with a mom who did community theater, and so I was always in a show. So I always loved theater, and you know, we'd slam down dinner and then race off to our shows. And so theater was a big part of my life. And then I let me think. So I got very lucky when I was an undergrad. I went to a college called Hampshire College, and one of my professors had a good friend by the name of Jack Sipes. And Jack, I was interested in theater and politics and social justice and social change. And he said, you got to meet Jack. And so Jack was a friend of his. He didn't teach at my school, and came and gave me a bunch of scripts from a company in Germany called the Grips Theater. And the Grips Theater was perhaps the most important theater for young people in the world, in that it was dealing with social issues, and the work was getting translated into languages all over the world. And it looked at the real conditions of young people's lives and asked really tough questions about. And the work was very smart, very Brechtian, very well written, beautifully performed. So I read these, and I was like, I'd never read anything quite like it. You know, like looking at young people without sentimentality or cuteness, but you know, dealing with class issues and divorce, but smart and funny and clever and real. So I started to direct them, and I directed them as an undergraduate. In fact, I think maybe one of my first directing experiences was also my first set design and set construction processes. So I built one, I designed the set and built it and then directed it, and we were doing it in a community center down in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And I wasn't a very good set designer or set builder. And so in the middle of the show, the set just fell down, and luckily no one was hurt. And I remember one little young man said, how I was like, yes, it did. But luckily I had great actors. They plowed on, performing on top of the broken set. And I decided I loved these plays, but I certainly shouldn't be around set construction or set design because I was a danger to the audience and everyone else. So I did that, and then I got the great good fortune then of hopping over to Berlin, hitchhiking across the country, grabbing the world's cheapest flight, showing up, crashing at someone's house, and showing up unannounced and saying, "Teach me everything, show me everything you've got." And I spent a couple of weeks in Berlin seeing every single show, hanging out with them and every other company, and it kind of blew my mind because here was work that kids wanted to see, that was about them, that respected them so much, that thought they were right, that they didn't try and teach them, but sort of excavated what was really happening. The actors were so good. They were all adults playing young people, but they spent like months, they rehearsed like in Europe where they rehearsed months rather than in America where you rehearse for an hour or whatever. And so they spent time, really digging into their characters and observing and without any cuteness or cloying or any of that stuff, just performed brilliantly. And I just remember seeing things I'd never seen. Lines of teenagers in their black leather jackets lined up to see plays about them. And I was like, wow, that's gorgeous. I'd never seen anything like this. And there were other companies around that were also doing really good work. And so I was like, whoa, a big sponge, just soaking it all in, seeing about that work. And it left an impact, because here were adults who were on the side of young people, allies to young people, believing young people, not condescending to them, respecting them, trusting them, not lying to them. And I was like, wow, they're telling the truth. And so I fell in love with the work. And then, oh God, the next part of the story, like you jump ahead a little bit. And so I go off to New York and I'm doing all kinds of stuff. And I finish school, I go to New York and I'm making all kinds of work. And I end up going to graduate school and I do all kinds of work there. And then I start directing. And then I just found I wanted to make work that connected to a community, that spoke with and for a community. And I was like, okay, I'm lower middle class, straight white guy. Okay, I could talk about myself and, whatever. And, I saw a lot of work, speaking to the gay community, the women's community, the Black community, the Latino community. And that was very inspiring to me, work that was inside a community that was part of a sense of movement, a sense of connection. And I said, well, I thought about like, who's doing this for young people in America with the kind of rigor that I saw in Germany? I said, oh, nobody. So I said, like, how do I learn from this work? It was happening in Italy, it was happening in England. Europe was alive with a lot of really great work at a time when there was some work happening in the United States, but it was much more fantastical, or imaginative in a good way, but not necessarily grounded in the complexity of young people's lives. And so I just saw that work. And then, I started doing, all this kind of experimental work for adults, but I just felt like I wanted to do work that connected to a community. And so that's a story that's a little longer, but I'll just stop there. It was just about how can you make a difference? How can you be an ally? How can you stand with someone and make work that speaks with them, for them, learn from them, and be about them? And so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of how it started. I got really inspired because I just saw great artists, passionate artists, fierce artists doing really good work. And it was like, wow, that's cool. This isn't happening in my country. How do we do something like this in my country?
Yeah, that certainly answers my question. Thank you very much. Now I'm thinking that I have to start looking at the theater being created overseas.
You do. And I will tell you why. Because there are so many good artists, and I've been very, very, very lucky in my life that I've been able to travel and see work, and you don't need a lot of money, you just need to get there. And you can stay in a hostel and eat bread, which is what I did, and then and you get there and you can see the work and people will welcome you in, people will welcome you. It's complicated now with COVID, but this will pass. There'll be another moment, and they're just artists who are making work that's so different than what we do. And I've been so lucky. I've been so inspired. Mm. So yes, go there. Go to Russia now that you're learning Russian.
Right now.
Okay, bye. Have a good trip. Pack your bags. It's going to get cold. Take your coat.
Amazing. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think being an ally for this community in particular is just so important. And what a beautiful mission to commit your life to. It's wonderful. Um, so my next question is, how long have you been with the Children's Theater Company?
2,000 years. No, uh, I got here in 97, so I'll let you do the math. So
Okay.
before that, I was at Honolulu Theater for Youth, and before that, I was at the Mark Taper Forum at the Center Theater Group in Los Angeles, and before that in New York.
Just lifetimes in theater, multiple lifetimes.
Yeah. When you do this a while, you get to spend a little time in different places, and you learn so much in every place. Oh my God.
That's amazing. That's the dream. So talking more to your role as artistic director of Children's Theater Company, if it's, at least if it's anything like the artistic director role in our theater company, Purple Grand Blares, the artistic director gets to have a big say in cultivating the season of shows that Children's Theater Company would produce. So my question is, what do you think about when it comes to structuring a season?
You think about everything in the world. You think about, on one hand, you're making a bouquet. So you think about all the flowers you're making a meal. So you want to think about like all the different things you get to serve. You think about why you do this and what you love about making theater. Because, well, frankly, we're not on this planet long. So you better do work that you love, and you better do work that you care deeply about, because whatever you do is going to be hard. Whatever show you do, it's a lot of work. And so it better be something you care deeply about and that you're passionate about, because you're going to work hard regardless, because anything is hard in making theater, and joyous and crazy. So I think about a lot of things, okay, to make a season. I think about uh, making work that is new for the audience, that they've never imagined, that's either from a voice or a story that is surprising, or an aesthetic that they've never seen before, that challenges them. I think about, are we giving voice and telling the stories of the diverse communities in our area, in our nation, to sort of challenge all of us and give artists the opportunity to tell stories that need to be told that haven't been told? What are the untold stories that must be told? How do we create a space for all voices? That's important. How are we serving a variety of age groups? We're a large theater. We serve a lot of age groups, multi-generational, preschool, 5 to 8s, the 8 to 12s. We did a lot of work for teens. We haven't done that in a while. It's a passion of mine to get back to that, because we made great, great, great work that I'm hugely proud of. What are the classics that need to be reimagined, and looked at again, because a classic is a classic because it's always new. A classic is a classic because it's always important. And what are those themes inside those that need to be, maybe take the dust off of them and make sure that they're still alive and vital, and you have a new way of looking at them, a new theatrical language to look at them. What's work? We have an acting company, a professional acting company. What's work that's going to challenge them and help them grow, and push them? Is there work that speaks to this particular region? Because I always think of every theater, in my opinion, well, not every theater, our theater. I like it to be both local, national, and international all at the same time. How are we making work that speaks to this unique region in the Midwest? How are we making work that speaks to where we are as a nation now? And how are we in a conversation that's global? Because it's a really small planet. We're all connected. That teacup that you're drinking out of was probably made in China. Your sweater was probably made in Malaysia or Bangladesh. It's like, it's a very small world, and we're all connected. So how do we think about all that? So we think about that. We look at what we've got in development. What have we got? Because at any given moment, we're developing, 10 to 12 to 14 new projects, musicals, one-person shows, silent pieces, object theater, puppet work, classics, adapting major feature films, adapting books, giving authors the opportunity to tell stories from their own lives that matter. And some of that's ready, and some of that's not ready yet, in our opinion, And so what's ready to go, what could be ready? So we look at that. What stories haven't been told in a while? we look all around this country and around the world. What are our colleagues doing? You know, in Cape Town, in Japan, in Chicago, et cetera, you know, that must be brought to our theater. What partnerships are we doing? Because we're in partnership with a number of companies now, creating new work. Which of those things are ready? Are we set? Are we locked? Is there work that's been created that we can present from around the world? Because we presented work from Australia and England and Sweden and Italy and across the country. You know, like what of that work is gorgeous and crazy and ready and exciting and that our audiences would enjoy. And you put all of that in a big pot and stir it up. And salt, pepper, and chili powder. And then you see how much it's going to cost. And then you have to do a budget, and then you have to do a calendar. And it usually takes us, oh, I wish it were simpler. It usually takes us about 15 tries to get a season that will, probably like you guys, like that accomplishes what you want to accomplish to the degree that you can, that brings the income in that you need and brings and handles the expenses. Because, you know, I also have to make sure we're making work not only that excites and challenges and inspires an audience, but also pays the bills, because I've got a staff of, you know, when we're all back, now it's a tough time in COVID, but when we're all back, it's, you know, 100 people, you know, full time that you want to make sure, you know, are taken care of. So, and then you just keep going over it and over it and over it until you get to something that can work with all of that, you know, that creates new opportunities, that pushes the audience, that challenges the audience, that inspires the audience, that brings in the revenue, that has a reason for being, you know, so you're not just doing it because, I mean, yeah, like that.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah, so there's a lot of considerations. I mean, we also have a performing apprentice program where we bring in young, primarily BIPOC artists in from across the country to, you know, give them their first professional job sometimes. And like, are there going to be opportunities for them in this too? You know, because we want everyone to grow and everyone to be able to do some wonderful work that challenges them.
Yeah. And then taking all of that consideration, because you're pulling so much from what's going on in the world and like how the world is changing. What would you say, or have you noticed any changes in the trends of like TYA seasons? Because 1997 is very different from 2020. So I can imagine the seasons are very different to fit the different worlds that they were living in. But like, have you seen any trends in the direction that TYA is going?
I may not be the best person to ask that to, but what I can say is a couple things. One is it's extraordinary, the growth in the field. You know, it is really, really, really exciting. The number of companies, the strength of those companies, how the quality of the production, the quality of the commissions, the willingness to partner, the growth of TYA USA, you know, that's become such a powerful, Schmidt-Chapman's doing such a terrific job, you know, in bringing the community together. So I guess what I've seen is the growth of the field, the professionalization of the field, the solidity of these organizations, the importance of these organizations across the country. A few states that still need a theater or two, but most places have one, you know, so it's getting better all the time, as the Beatles would say. And so trends, you know, I think, you know, I look at, I'm pleased by the increase in the work for the early learners. So that's a really exciting area. That's an area that's very near and dear to my heart. I just love that work and have been blessed to make a bunch of work for the preschool age. Excited about work for even younger. We haven't done that, you know, the really young work. I'm excited about work for kids on the spectrum. I think there's some extraordinary work happening there. I'm excited by all the partnerships that people are having. How do you find ways to work together? And that's great because you don't have to do it all yourself. And there can be strength in that exchange of ideas. You know, when I started at CTC, we were making it all on our own, and now we're partnering with other TYA theaters and partnering with LORT theaters, you know, larger regional theaters, and so there's all kinds of partnerships that we're doing. And you learn it's harder, it's more complicated, it's messier, it takes longer sometimes, but that exchange of ideas is great. I mean, like the relationship we had with Chicago with Jackie, when we did Last Stop on Market Street, you know, it was just so fun. She's so smart. And then working together, you know, and we saw her production, and then, you know, we had a great conversation, and then, you know, took all those notes, and she and I then, you know, passed those notes on to the playwright, the composer, and the director. And, you know, the piece took another step when it was able to come to our theater, because we saw, you know, opportunities. And, you know, it was just so much fun working with her. She's so smart, so great. That was like, sweet. You know, we're developing a partnership with her and Matt, you know, at the Rose. And so I'm looking forward to that, because I've known Matt for a long time. And so, you know, looking forward to those conversations and, you know, stirring it up. And so that's terrific. You know, I think there's a seriousness of intent about commissioning and producing work by BIPOC artists, you know, about real issues in our lives. And so I'm excited by that. That's really important. There's a lot of good stuff happening.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really good time. I think it's a really extraordinary time for the field. You know, I've never seen anything quite like it. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's never going to be easy. It's never going to be easy, but this is sort of a, you know, it's a time of growth. And I mean, obviously with COVID, and it's a time of extraordinary challenge, but the kind of discourse that's happening in the field, you know, about representation, about Jedi issues of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, about new forms, you know, it's terrific.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to say it's a time of metamorphosis, in terms of like when a caterpillar goes into its cocoon, it has to break down into goo, like break its entire body down in order to become this beautiful butterfly. And we just don't see that like breaking down part. So we
So are you saying this is the goo period?
I'm saying that we are on the way to becoming a butterfly. So yes, we are
Okay.
we are struggling through the goo period.
I don't know how I feel about thinking that we're in the goo period. I don't know if that makes my day or not. Like, I hope we were beyond goo, but I defer to your wisdom.
It's the promise of we're heading to something new and something greater.
Okay.
Challenge
Okay.
a lot of the things happening in our industry right now, which is what I'm getting at for the goo period. You are not
Okay.
a leader. TYA is not.
Out of the goo and into the sky. Use the goo. Live the goo. Okay. Do not be afraid of the goo. Okay.
Good. I'm gonna put that on a T-shirt. Do not be afraid.
So that's the new T-shirt.
Yep. I also think that in order to see the direction that TYA is going, we have to look at a lot of the new work being generated right now. And I know that, as you were mentioning, the Children's Theater Company does a lot of developmental work, and you've developed over 200 productions to date, which is remarkable. So that being said, I'm wondering, what stories do you crave to see in the TYA canon that maybe don't exist there now? Or even like stories you crave more of?
It's interesting. It's not just about stories, it's about style, and it's about kinds of theatrical language. I was just in a conversation a couple days ago with the remarkable playwright Lloyd Suh, who just won the Horton Foote Prize, and the brilliant director Eric Ting, who are working on a play for us based on Lloyd's family in the Korean War. And it is a elegant, tight, you know, sort of, in a way, underwritten so that it doesn't explain everything, piece about what happened to his family during the Korean War, where they had to flee and they produced the best apples in Korea. And so every family member had to take something. Dad carried the rice, mom carried the water, you know, one kid carried the, I don't know, the pots and the pans. Grandma carried wisdom, and Bina carried the apples, one for each person. And then it's the story of what happened when they go on their journey and a bomb hits and they're separated. And so it's Bina's journey to find her family in the middle of this complex landscape. And yes, It is specific to Lloyd's family. It is specific to the Korean War, and it is absolutely universal to every refugee fleeing Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. And so it is, and in a way, El Salvador and Honduras and the gang violence that's there. It is so beautiful and so elegant and so smart. And you read it and you go like, this is a great piece of writing. This is just great, great play. And it works on so many levels. And so I guess I'm looking for work that isn't afraid of of finding its own theatrical language, the way Lloyd has done, and the vision that Eric's bringing to this, that isn't afraid of tackling complex issues and finding the humanity. I mean, this play's also funny. I mean, it's bizarrely funny and heartbreaking and surprising. And so work that trusts the audience, work that gives space for the audience, so that's, I'm excited about that work. We're working with a wonderful playwright, Eva Baeza, who had an idea of slamming together slave narratives and Alice in Wonderland and creating an in-depth look at a chapter that we think we know, but that we don't know in American history, which is the world of the slave and the world of the runaway, and the fact that there were slave catchers up north in New York City. I mean, you think of this as isolated, and so she's in the early stages, but her thinking is so deep and so profound and so moving to us, and so surprising. It's epic. It's like a giant, fat, juicy novel, and so I can't wait to see it in draft. So, or the piece Larissa Fasthorse is writing, which is about her life of growing up on the reservation, and having her legs turned in, and then being told in her little town in the Dakotas that she could either do ballet or Swedish gymnastics. And as she brilliantly says, no one had ever heard of Swedish gymnastics, so she was forced to do ballet. And it's about her journey as a young Native girl growing up, adopted by a white family, into the world of ballet, and yet thinking about the great Native dancers who became ballerinas as inspirations, and then finding her own way. We've been working on it for a number of years. And, it'll be this combination of dance and theater and personal story. And, on one hand, a world about the cruelty and difficulty of ballet, on the other, about a young girl trying to find her identity inside an alien art form. So I love those things that are, you don't quite know what it is. It's a dance piece, it's a theater piece, it's a journey piece. I just hope for work that's surprising. I hope for work that doesn't feel, that gives artists voice and gives artists space and gives artists room to surprise us, and surprise us with form, surprise us with content. It doesn't feel the need to teach or moralize or tie it together neatly, that isn't afraid of mystery and isn't afraid of politics. Kids live in this world, and with the invention of that cell phone that has the internet, that has access to every piece of information, they're more sophisticated. You can't hide anything from them. And I'm a parent. Of course you want to protect your kids. Of course you want them to be shielded from horrible and violent and brutal and cruel and ugly and racist things, but you can't. That's the world. And so you have to give them the tools of critical thinking and empathy and analysis, and so that all those moments when they encounter that stuff aren't hidden from them, but are teachable moments. Are moments where they can wrestle with it and bring their values that hopefully the theater has engendered in them about deep compassion and deep care for others and deep understanding. So I don't think I answered your question, but I just, I think it's, these are really difficult times. And I think the theater has to find a way to be a player in these times and to speak to these times and to engage with these times, because we're more isolated from each other than ever in our little, Fox News or CNN or MSNBC bubbles and our, and New York Post versus New York Times and all these things that are self-referential echo chambers where we only hear those voices that we want to hear, which is not how the world actually gets to work, because we actually have to bump into each other. We actually have to make things together. And so, so the more that we're asking people to walk in other shoes, asking people to think differently, asking people to imagine, and theater does that better than any other art form, because it is dance, it's music, it's storytelling, it's design, it's characters, it's story, it's all these things coming together. So I think we have a great opportunity and responsibility to make work that hopefully challenges and hopefully inspires and hopefully lifts people and brings people together. Because boy, we separated on this planet right now. Woo-wee. It's crazy. It is crazy. And it won't get better on its own. It's going to take work and will. It's not just going to magically come together. Nothing happens by magic, unfortunately, except in Vegas. But, so those are a couple. Yeah, I think it's an extraordinary time to make sure that we're hearing a plethora of voices that and that a variety of aesthetics, that's the great thing about theater. It isn't one thing. It isn't a couch and two people having an argument in a living room. It can be wordless and dance and video and all projection and no language. I mean, I love the work that we've done that's immersive. I love the work that we've done that is silent. I love the work that we've done that's driven mostly by dance. I love the work that we've done that are giant musicals. These are all different kinds of worlds. And I guess what I love about the theater is it's such a big tent and there's room for all of it.
Yeah, I know at Purple Crayon Players, we talk a lot about choosing stories that like reach above the doorknob. So it's not like talking down or like something that's easily within reach. We want to challenge audience members to present the world in all of its flaws and challenging aspects. I mean, the world is a challenge in and of itself. So we like to capture that in our work. And I feel like that really resonates with what you're saying, Peter. It's beautiful and complex, and something that we're so lucky to get to capture in this field.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's also a world where you get to be unfettered in your imagination, because, the glory of young people is, while they can be incredibly literal, their minds are filled with associative possibilities and filled with poetic possibilities. We just had our fundraiser to raise money for the theater, and of course it's virtual. And I just had this encounter with this little guy. We were taking a package to a donor, and part of that was, some treats for them to enjoy the virtual fundraiser with, and also they were all themed. So this one had a Wizard of Oz theme. So we had the little legs of the witch that I stuck in one of the planters, and the little boy came out and said, "What are those?" I said, "Well, those are the legs of the witch that just flew down here." He said, "Well, where is she?" I said, "Well, maybe she flew away. But if you take these shoes, then you can fly." And he looked at me for the longest time and he said, "But how will I get down?" Which was silly. So I said, "Well, you'll flap your arms like this, then you'll bend your knees, and then you'll land very gently." Okay. And so it was like he was working this out because he was very interested in flying, but he also was concerned about like landing. And so I was like, "I love you so much. You're such a good little guy." And so he was with that in every shape of the way. He was like ready to fly. Just had to have one concern about landing because he's not stupid. And he's like, and so I guess what I'm saying is part of the work we have is also to, exercise the power of that imagination, the freedom of that imagination, and the glory of that surreal associative mind, that kids can have. Can get beaten out. It can get beaten out. The rational world can like constrict and constrict. And so part of our job is to, what did Picasso say? That he spent his entire life as an artist trying to get back to the mind of a child. And so there's that freedom in that space. And so you want to, you want, I guess what I love about theater is it can do all of that. It can engage us with the issues of today. It can take us into flights of fancy that just lift us up and transform us and let us see the possibilities and the poetic and surreal and gorgeous and ridiculous, you know, things that humans can do.
Yeah. Um, and as we're speaking to like this beauty and all these possibilities within this field, I also would love to talk to you about your thoughts on like the TYA stigma in the field of theater, and like whether it exists and how it exists. So what I mean by stigma is the disparity between TYA and then what others would refer to as grown-up theater. And so my first question would be, have you experienced the TYA stigma?
No,
No.
no. I've been very blessed. You know, when I worked in LA, I got great actors and, you know, and great designers, and we paid them well, and they did their work, you know. Now, there were some struggles, and the struggle initially was, you know, like some of the papers, like particularly like the alternative weeklies, weren't going to cover us. So I wrote to all of them and said, how dare you not cover this audience? They're the poorest, most oppressed audience, and it's ageist and absolutely reprehensible that you would discriminate against an entire audience. And I had meetings with editors, and they would yell at me. It's like, how dare you accuse me of, you know, discrimination? I said, well, it's just interesting that you're choosing not to cover an entire population and those professional artists who are working on them. And, you know, step by step, they all came around and they covered us, and we got full, you know, and we've done the same thing with foundations. There are a few foundations that don't support the work. In fact, literally today, I was writing to one that I wrote to, and they're going to keep their guidelines, which are discriminatory, because they feel the need to do some limiting. I'm going to write back and press again because I find it simply reprehensible, you know, and unacceptable. It's unacceptable, and it's backward, and we're not in the 50s, you know, and also the work was different back then, and it's different now, and so I've encountered it in some places in the journalistic world, but for a moment, and then you press and you make your case, and I've been very lucky. We've been able to sort of change that conversation. In the funding world, I haven't won all the battles, but I've won some, and you know, I'm not going to rest till I win all of them, because there should be no prohibition ever against funding this work. It's just completely unacceptable. And so, but you know, when you treat artists well and you pay them properly and you give them opportunities to do good work, people say yes. I mean, in my experience, now I've worked at large institutions. I understand that Honolulu, you know, was the largest professional theater in the state. So that's, while it's a smaller theater, it's still a major player in that state. And we got good actors and good designers. And so it has not been, you know, a issue that I've had to wrestle with. I mean, in Minneapolis, the first string critic reviews us. We get featured stories on our shows, because back when we did shows, back when there were newspapers, you know, all that happened. And so I know there are other areas in the country where the fight is on. You know, I know, you know, the DC area where they've stopped reviewing theater for young people. It's horrifying, terrible, and it's a tough fight because very few reviewers and all that. Those are serious fights. Those are serious fights, and they're worth fighting, because it doesn't serve the field, it doesn't serve the artists, it doesn't serve the young people, it doesn't serve families, it doesn't serve anybody. It should be part of the discourse. It should be part of the conversation. And that work should be treated exactly the same, and treated and given the same critical rendering and same critical standards. And when it's not good, tear it apart. When it's good, celebrate it, you know?
Yeah, of
Hold
course.
it to the highest standards, because that's how we treat our own work. You know, we know when our work is, when we've hit it and we've done our work, and we know when didn't quite get there. You know, it's painful because.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually reading an article right before hopping into this interview, which is what inspired this question, about this attitude with the media when it comes to covering TYA. And I'm interested in where you think that attitude stems from, like that stigma within covering TYA comes from. Where is it rooted?
Again, that has not been my experience. So I'm speaking of, experience that I know happens around the country. And I don't mean to sound arrogant about that. I'm just saying that's actually the case, So where does it come from? It comes from, it comes from all kinds of places. It comes from the fact that it's a parallel universe to some critics, all right? It's not what they normally see, You go see this kind of work and it doesn't occur to you to see this other work. So it's a parallel universe. I have that with writers all the time. Not that they come with a negative sense, it's just never crossed their mind. Because a lot of the writers we commission are writers who've never written for this audience. We commission writers, generally whose work blows our minds. And if they haven't written for this audience, that's not a problem. We're the translators. We help. We provide, notes as necessary. But, because there's no way to write for this audience. There's a multitude of ways to create for this audience. There's not one kind of writing. And so they just go, oh, that's, I never thought about it, And I think with some critics, they just haven't thought about it, And if you haven't thought about it, you also haven't seen, you haven't seen the great work that's happening in our field. You haven't seen the rigorous work. You haven't seen the remarkable performances. And so, it's often the work is funded at a lower level, in some cases in different communities. It's not the case in Minneapolis, where we're the second largest theater in the state, you know what I'm saying? But in other places, that funding disparity can sometimes mean you're not using professional actors, you're using students, you're using all kinds of things, which can affect quality. It doesn't always, it can, And so, and some of the work can be more commercially driven and more enslaved to a title rather than taking that title and finding its essence, And so simply rendering that title in a way that is the most simply palatable can diminish that experience and develop a kind of disdain, the rigor of acting, when you see adults doing that kind of acting that is not true, not rigorous, not heartfelt, that's cute in some way, can be hard to watch, it can be hard to watch. And so we have in LA and Hawaii, I only worked with adults, so I know those challenges of getting adults to play truth and adults to play the honesty of young people and not, doing a caricature or a cartoon or a mockery or diminishing the stakes in a situation as if young people's lives aren't complicated every day. You raise your hand to answer the question in class, you get the wrong answer and everyone laughs at you. You're going to go home and be humiliated all day. It's brutal. Or you don't get chosen for the sports team. You wear that. The rejections that you get as a kid are so much more painful than what you or I go through on any Wednesday. You know what I mean? It's so much harder. It's so much harder to be a kid. Also, your body's changing. You're having to prove yourself every second. It's just so much harder. And some of that, sometimes our work doesn't honor that fully. And so that can contribute to a critical distancing or a critical diminishing or a critical whatever.
Yeah.
That was a weird tangent, but
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate all of your thoughts. And knowing that this isn't necessarily rooted in your experience, do you have any thoughts when it comes to steps to overcome that stigma? I feel like you've mentioned little tidbits along the way in the past couple of questions, but just like steps that either the industry or society should take.
Well, the thing that we do is be brutal. Make the best work you can. Don't accept performances that are less. Don't stop pushing. Don't, it can't be good enough. It has to be extraordinary. And when it's not, don't give up. Keep going. So the work's got to be really strong. This audience deserves it. This is the most important audience in the world. This audience will be changed and informed and transformed by this work. They'll remember it the rest of their lives. And if you're at a large regional theater and you're performing to an upper middle class, 69, 72-year-old audience, that's a nice thing to do, but it won't fundamentally change their lives. In the same way that when we do our job and we do it brilliantly, we've affected someone for the rest of their lives. They will always carry that with us. And if you do it badly, you will turn them off to an art form. They will go, that theater is boring or it's stupid. And trust me, it happens every day that someone is turned off to this art form. And that's tragic. This is all I know how to do. I believe in it. It's a beautiful thing. I love the theater. I grew up in it. And so I want people to love it. And so, so I think I always talk about it as a sacred opportunity and responsibility. When you put something on in front of a young person, oh, Lordy, it better be good. You have better analyzed every moment and made real choices, because the moment you allow that the work is sloppy, or that you haven't made real choices, or you haven't investigated it in rehearsal or in the design process or in the writing process, oh God, is it transparent? Oh my God, do the kids know it and feel it? And and so I'm a big believer in, so it's be savage on your own work. Don't accept anything less. Don't be brutal to yourself. In that way, just be tough, and then surround yourself with people who are going to be equally challenging and not flatterers. So that's one thing. Have those conversations with the press in your town. Make the case. Have the conversation with the funders. It's unacceptable not to cover the work. If they don't listen, have your board talk to them. And talk to their publisher. You're an advertiser, and you're not the biggest advertiser, but you're an advertiser. You're part of the cultural landscape, and so it's unacceptable. It is simply unacceptable not to cover this work. You won't win every fight, but you might win one or two. And so try and develop a relationship with the critics and the funders. Have them see the work. Have them talk about the work. Don't expect them to get it because they're on another planet. You got to bring them in and tell them what the work's about and why you're doing it. Have them meet the artists. Let them see how serious these artists are and how hard they work and how critically the artists are thinking. I mean, some of the artists we commission are some of the best artists working in America today and around the world. And so it's like, you're lucky to get the opportunity to be in the space with this artist. You're lucky to see their work. And they're serious and they're really, really good at what they do. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So and surprise the audience with work that, And also, I guess the other thing I would say is the way we think about this is a little differently maybe, which is I know that we're making work. We always think multi-generationally, so that there's an 8-year-old coming to see the play. A lot of our audience is family, so it's a little different than a lot of my colleagues, where a lot of their audience is school groups, okay? So that's really different. But I know that there's an 8-year-old coming to see this show. And they may be coming with their mom or their grandpa or their uncle or their auntie or a caregiver and a grandparent. So this work is operating from a 65-year-old, a 42-year-old, and an 8-year-old. So it's and maybe a 4-year-old. So it's operating simultaneously on multiple levels of perception and multiple levels of experience. So I know that this work has to be as compelling for you as it is for that 8-year-old, as it is for the 74-year-old, or whatever that is. And so, which means that it has to operate with truth and with rigor and surprise for every single person in there. And yes, we design it for the little ones, but we don't dumb it down. We don't make it easy. We make the stakes high. We try and make the work matter and the choices as rigorous as possible. So the adult is having a profound emotional experience at the same time. I mean, I remember I won't mention the name. I remember just taking my kid when he was little to see a sequel of one of an animated film. And it's just so bad. It was so painful. And I remember watching it and going like, no one spent any time on this script. Who okayed this? Who greenlit this? And so I'm just sleeping and my kid's watching this not just sound asleep, because it's just torture on a Saturday morning. And I was so angry because I was like, not the lack of rigor, the lack of investment in making sure that there was something at stake for me as an adult, something at stake for my wee little guy. And why am I saying this? I'm just saying this because we always think that there's multiple paths into every piece. And like, are you creating a pathway for that 8-year-old and that 4-year-old? And for that 8-year-old, it may be, oh my God, that person, there's so much rage and the need for revenge. And for the 4-year-old, they're sad or they're angry. It's going to be a different take. And for the adult to be like, oh my God, that's just what I went through, with my mother. It's like, it's going to operate on a multitude of levels. And that's cool because you want everyone in that house to be having a profound experience. You want them all to want to come back. You want them all to have a different experience, but a profound experience. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that answered the question either.
Yes.
That's anyway.
Thank you. Thank you for those thoughts. They're truly, truly appreciated.
Oh, sure.
And I hope that not only Purple Grand players, but we as an industry can adapt that mindset going forward. As if we aren't already. Some amazing work is being created in this world.
That's right. No, it's a great time. There's so much work, across this theater, across this field, so many young companies starting up, so much original work, so much devised work. No, it's incredible. It's incredible. There's a lot of, I've never been more encouraged in my life. And we need you, and we need all your colleagues, and we need this next generation to sort of blow it all up and start again and reimagine it, because there's room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of amazing stories, I mean, we of course are putting up this Playground Festival of Fresh Works, which is premiering three new works and 3 amazing new stories with the intent of speaking to all audiences, not just young audiences. As you were talking about before, we like to say theater for young audiences is theater for all audiences. So adapting that mindset, but it's 3 amazing shows. We have Scaredy Cat Presents, Wave Goodbye, and Ash and Feather, with just amazing stories and amazing words to back them. And I know that you brought in some amazing gifts when it comes to words and like how they fill out stories and tell these amazing stories when it comes to writing. Did you want to share some of those with us?
Sure. So when I read the descriptions of those plays, which all sound really wonderful and exciting, and congrats to the authors and congrats to you for giving them a life, I thought they inspired 2 different kinds of thinking. One was that idea of speaking your own truth and speaking about those things that are complicated and difficult and finding a language to do them in. And, the author Jason Reynolds is a really important, author, and has created some really beautiful work. And he has a book that was just recommended to me, I know it's been out a while, called Long Way Down, which is about a young man whose brother is killed on the street. And Jason has chosen to tell these stories in a series of very short, very tight, very beautiful poems. And so I thought, part of our job is to know which stories really matter to us and find a language in which to tell them that I think not only captures that, but elevates it, transports the audience. And Jason just finished it 2 nights ago. And so Jason did that for me. And so it's called Long Way Down. I just thought I'd read a couple of the pieces. And it starts with, don't nobody believe nothing these days, which is why I haven't told nobody the story I'm about to tell you. And truth is, you probably ain't gonna believe it either. You're gonna think I'm lying or I'm losing it, but I'm telling you, this story is true. It happened to me, really, it did. It so did. That's how the piece starts. Wow. And then jumping ahead a little bit, this one's called When Bad Things Happen. When bad things happen, we can usually look up and see the moon big and bright shining over us. That always made me feel better. Like there's something up there beaming down on us in the dark. But the day before yesterday, when Sean died, the moon was off. Somebody told me once a month, the moon blacks out and becomes new, and the next night be back to normal. I'll tell you one thing. The moon is lucky it's not down here where nothing is ever new. And there's a theme that goes through the book of anagrams. And he starts it right here when he goes, anagram is when you take a word and rearrange the letters to make another word. And sometimes the words are still somehow connected. For example, canoe equals ocean. Same letters, different words, somehow still make sense together, like brothers. It goes on. It's beautiful. It's very powerful, you know. And then there's the other kind of work where you allow the imagination unfettered freedom. You allow the sense of surreal play and imagistic work to triumph. There's a choreographer, dancer, painter, author, genius named Remy Charlotte, who wrote a beautiful book called Arm in Arm. And the opening image, which I just love, is a picture of two octopuses. One in a top hat and one with a nice little beanie on. And the text is, two octopuses got married and walked down the aisle. Arm in arm, in arm, in arm, in arm, in arm, in arm, in arm. In arm, 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 in arm. So I just love that because it just suggests, you know, a world of play and the use of language. He has another one that's just, it's just this much text on a big white page. It says, how theater was born, a play. First caveman, hitting second caveman with club, ugh, whack. Second caveman, passing out, ouch. Cave boy, applauding, hooray, hooray, do it again. Play, the birth of theater in caveland. And then this one, which is a beautiful series of, looks like little watercolor drawings. And the text is the following. A green sky was followed by a blue sky, followed by a night sky, followed by a fat lie, followed by a cherry pie, followed by a striped tie, followed by a black eye, followed by a butterfly, followed by a day in July, followed by a magpie, followed by a deep sigh, followed by a bye-bye, followed by a good cry, followed by a blue sky. So I was like, and I don't know if you can see the images at all. Can that read it all? Yeah, a little bit, right? So you just see the world of this. And so when I think of gifts, I think of telling the truth, and I think of letting your imagination fly. And both of these authors, Jason doing it in a contemporary way that is riveting, elegant, tight, and Remy doing it from some decades back in a way that is explosively real, unfettered in its imagination, and absolutely joyous. So those are my little tiny presents.
Well, they're not tiny in any sense. They're grand gifts that you just gave to us, Peter. Thank you.
You're very kind.
And speaking of stories and poems and words that spoke to you, I would love to hear from our viewers what words and poems and stories really resonate with you, either in like the depth of your soul or in that more imaginative, playful world. You could leave a comment in the comment section of this video. You can also email us at playgroundtyafestival@gmail.com or connect with us on any of our social media platforms, links to which will be in the description of this video. And then while you're at it, I know that Children's Theater Company has some productions going up online soon, right? Corduroy, yeah, goes up October 12th through the 25th. Which is actually during the festival, so you can pop over there and then pop over to Playground. Just a day full of TYA, like
right.
What's better? And then also Last Stop on Market Street is coming up in November, and that's November 9th through the 22nd. I think I have that right. Amazing, yeah. And then Playground, Festival of Fresh Works, is going up starting October 10th, Scaredy Cat Presents by Jimmy Knighton, then October 18th, Wave Goodbye by by Talia Kingston. And then we have October 25th, which is Ash and Feather, by our lovely playwright, who I'm forgetting the name of right now. That's awful of me. Give me 1 second to figure this out. Ash and Feather. Hold up, Sharon Francis. There we go. There's so many titles and names floating around in my brain. It just slipped right out of there, but she's lovely. Sharon Francis, please come see her words. You can reserve your free ticket at our Eventbrite page. There's links to it on all of our social media everywhere. Yeah, and we can't wait to see you there. Amazing. So thank you again for coming, Peter. We're so glad to have you here. And thank you all for tuning in at home. Hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.